He walked into court as a victim. He walked out accused. Michael arrived at the courthouse early that morning. The hallway was still quiet. No cameras, no crowd. Just the sound of footsteps echoing off marble floors. He wore a gray suit. Nothing expensive, nothing noticeable. He looked exactly like someone who had been pushed too far and finally decided to fight back. Michael was 32 years old. He had filed a lawsuit against his former wife, his second wife. He claimed that the marriage had destroyed his life, that he had lost his home, his savings, his stability, and his sense of dignity. According to him, everything had been taken by the person he trusted the most. When the judge entered the courtroom, Michael stood with everyone else. He did not look at his ex-wife. He stared straight ahead. When it was his turn to speak, he kept his voice calm. No anger, no theatrics, just a story. He said they met when he was 27. She was older, successful, confident. She worked in real estate. She understood money. She understood systems. He described himself as someone who was still figuring life out. They got married a year later. At first, everything felt stable. She handled the finances. She said it was easier that way. Michael agreed. He signed documents without reading every detail because he trusted her. Then, according to him, things changed. She controlled every expense, every decision, every account. If he questioned anything, she would say, "Why don't you trust me?" And he would back down. He told the court that he never had access to joint accounts. He didn't understand the legal structure. He didn't know the house was in her name only. When the marriage ended, he walked away with nothing. That was why he was here. The courtroom was silent. Michael sounded believable, worn down, careful with his words, like a man who had been emotionally and financially overpowered. His attorney stood and said, "My client was vulnerable. He was under the influence of a more dominant partner. He did not fully understand the consequences of what he signed." Then the defense attorney rose. He didn't rush. He simply asked, "Mr. Michael, were you ever married before this marriage?" Michael hesitated, then answered, "No, this was my first marriage." The attorney nodded and opened a folder. "Then perhaps you can explain why our records show a divorce finalized 3 years earlier." A murmur spread across the courtroom. The attorney continued. He introduced a marriage certificate, divorce records, and documentation, proving the existence of 2 minor children. Michael had never mentioned them. It became clear that before this marriage, Michael had a first wife, 2 children, and a legal obligation to pay child support. The judge leaned forward. The attorney asked, "Why did you state on official documents that you had no children?" Michael didn't answer. The attorney went on. After his first divorce, Michael was officially listed as unemployed, without assets, without property. In other words, judgment-proof. Yet records showed he lived comfortably, used vehicles registered to his second wife, traveled, and never appeared financially distressed. Everything of value was in someone else's name. The reason became obvious. Michael had structured his life to appear broke so he could pay the minimum possible child support. His second wife had no knowledge of the first marriage, did not know about the children, and had never been informed about unpaid or minimized support obligations. The judge asked directly, "Did you intentionally hide the existence of your children from your spouse?" Michael finally spoke. "I didn't think it was relevant at the time." The defense attorney asked one final question. "And is that why you insisted that no assets ever be placed in your name?" Michael lowered his head. The court recessed. When proceedings resumed, everything had changed. Michael was no longer a man who had been taken advantage of. He was a man who had built his life on concealment. The judge returned to the bench. This time, he carried a thicker file. "The court has reviewed more than just the plaintiff's complaint," the judge said. "We have reviewed patterns." He spoke slowly, carefully. "It appears that you concealed the existence of minor children, intentionally misrepresented your financial status, structured ownership to avoid child support obligations, and entered a marriage under false pretenses." The courtroom was silent. The court therefore denies the plaintiff's claim in its entirety, but the judge did not close the file. Furthermore, this court orders referral to child support enforcement, notification of the Internal Revenue Service, a review for potential fraud and misrepresentation, and recalculation of support obligations based on actual income. Michael's face went pale. The judge added, "Pending investigation, you are prohibited from leaving the country." At that moment, Michael realized this was no longer about his ex-wife. This was no longer a civil dispute. It had become a matter of the state. The judge concluded, "You claimed you lost everything. What you actually lost was control over a lie that lasted too long." Court was adjourned. As Michael exited the courtroom, two officials stepped closer. They didn't need to introduce themselves. His second wife remained seated. She looked at him not with anger, not with sadness, but like someone realizing she had never truly known the person she married. Somewhere else in the country, two children waited for a father who had spent years explaining his absence as financial hardship. That day, Michael didn't go home, because he didn't really have one. He walked into court believing he was a victim. He walked out as someone the system would now examine very closely. Sometimes court is not where justice begins. It's where deception finally ends. Even if your lie survives 100 years, eyes don't lie.